Iraq takes legal actions against Turkey for exporting oil from Iraq's Kurdistan region without Baghdad's consent. Syrian militants shelled President Assad's election rally in southern Syria, killing at least 21 people. Thailand's military detains the country's former prime minister along with dozens of other politicians. And Russian President Vladimir Putin blames Washington for creating a full-scale civil war in Ukraine. Hello, you're watching Al Ittijah World News. I'm Zainab Alawi. Turkey has announced the beginning of Iraqi oil shipment from the semi-autonomous Kurdistan region through its ports, to the dismay of the central government in Baghdad, who countered with a lawsuit against Ankara.
If relations between Turkey and Iraq weren't turbulent enough, things are set to become a lot more tense. After the Turkish energy minister Taner Yildiz announced that his country has begun exporting Iraqi oil without the approval of Baghdad. The shipment of northern Iraqi oil waiting at Sayyan to international markets has started. Turkey's decision to export Iraqi oil without consent has infuriated Baghdad. As a result, the Iraqi Oil Ministry took legal action against Ankara in the Paris-based International Chamber of Commerce. Over the past few months, Ankara has been pumping Iraqi oil through the semi-autonomous Kurdistan region. They have stored a total of 2.5 million barrels in ships at the Sayyan port on the Mediterranean Sea. The Turkish move is also likely to raise tensions between the Kurds and Baghdad after the April 30 election, in which the country's Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki emerged as the biggest winner. He has previously threatened to act if Iraqi oil was sold without Baghdad's consent.
We
will never allow Iraqi oil to be exported except through the Ministry of Oil. This is a constitutional violation, which we will never allow, not for the Kurdistan region nor for the Turkish government. We have measures to adopt.
The Kurds' unilateral selling of crude oil through Turkey will likely plunge the country into another political catastrophe, adding to the already chaotic post-election political scene.
Earlier, we were joined by political analyst Dr. Kamel Wazni, who said that economic trade between Ankara and the central government in Baghdad will likely be compromised as a result of those oil exports.
The region of Kurdistan used the occasion of having an election in the country and in the process of electing a new prime minister to allow this shipment and to actually let the status quo to be the case in this situation. I think this will not kind of go very well with the central government. It's going to be considered a major violation and interference by Turkey, and a violation from the Kurdistan in that end by allowing the oil to go through Turkey without the permission of the central government. Is, as they say, we are separate entity, we are separate country, and we can do economically as we wish without any consideration for the central government. And I think this will have some consequences, and I'm sure when the government meet again and select a new prime minister and a cabinet. Now we have the current prime minister, and I think probably he will be also the prime minister who will lead the coalition. I think there will be a different tone that will take place with Turkey, which has been heavily involved in the affair of the Iraqi people. We have to wait and to see what the action that has to be taken. But there is a lot of trade that goes between Iraq and Turkey, and there is a lot of connection between the two countries. And I think as a result, we're going to see some action by the government of Iraq regarding that end. Probably, if the situation continue to be as such, we should not be surprised if we saw some disruption to that economic trade between Iraq and Turkey. They decided not to actually allow it to happen without having an agreement between the central government and Kurdistan and Turkey. Obviously, at this point, they actually make good use of the time, thinking that everybody is involved in politics and everybody is involved in thinking about creating a government, so they can get away with this now and in the long run.
More than 20 people have been killed and scores injured in a mortar attack fired by foreign-backed Takfiri militants on an election campaign rally in the southern city of Daraa. Now, this as fierce clashes continued between the Syrian army and militant groups across the northern city of Aleppo.
In the latest wave of deadly attacks carried out by militant groups, at least 20 civilians have been killed following a mortar shell that targeted a pro-Assad election campaign rally in the airport district of the southern Syrian city of Daraa. Reports have emerged that more than 20 people were killed and scores injured as unwary civilians were rallying to support Syria's first multi-candidate presidency race set to be held on June 3rd. The pro-opposition Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said a child was among the dead in the strike, which also injured more than 30 people, the first such attack since campaigning got underway earlier this month. Foreign-backed militants have long used mortar rounds as a weapon to target civilians, due to its highly destructive nature, paying the least attention to the weapon's lack of accuracy. Elsewhere in the strife-ridden country, fierce clashes are continuing between the Syrian army and foreign-backed insurgents in Syria's once commercial hub Aleppo, killing and injuring scores. Military sources announced that units of the Syrian army have regained control of several districts of Aleppo's countryside, including Al-Ramusa and Al-Sheikh Najar. Syrian army units also targeted hideouts belonging to the Al-Qaeda affiliate Al-Nusra Front in the area of Masakin Hanano, reportedly killing several gunmen. The recent Syrian army operation around Aleppo's central prison, breaking a 13-month-long siege, have placed government forces within reach of Castello Road, which militants in Aleppo heavily rely on as a supply route leading to a rare base in the countryside.
One day after a military coup was mounted, Thailand's armed forces have detained dozens of leaders belonging to the kingdom's ousted government, including former Premier Yingluck Shinawatra.
In a move aimed at tightening its grip on the politically unstable Southeast Asian nation, Thailand's new military junta has detained the kingdom's ousted government leaders on Friday, following a coup that has provoked an international outcry. Thailand's ex-premier Yingluck Shinawatra was summoned by the military before being driven to an undisclosed location. Dozens of prominent figures from both sides of the political divide were also ordered to show up. However, it remains unclear where they are being held. Vowing to halt months of political bloodshed, coup-makers led by the tough-talking army chief declared a nationwide nighttime curfew and ordered masses of rival demonstrators off the streets. All television and radio stations, including foreign broadcasters, were ordered to air only a steady stream of army announcements, and the junta warned it would block social media platforms that carry anti-coup content. While some people welcomed the coup as a possible way out of the crisis, others voiced unease at the power grab.
I'm quite disappointed because we've spent 6 months protesting and the people haven't gained anything. Now that the soldiers have taken control, people like us will not be able to have our voices heard.
I will come here again if they do not do what we were demanding. I will come again. But if they do go ahead with reforms, then we will not come out. We want to know how the new government will operate.
How exactly the government will operate remains unclear, given that the military also has thrown out the constitution it drew up in 2007 after a previous coup, except for Section 2, which acknowledges that the king is the head of state.
Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin stated that Ukraine is in the midst of an all-out civil war, blaming Washington for the chaos in Kiev. Putin made the remarks at an economic forum in St. Petersburg, during which he held the U.S. responsible for what he called a full-scale civil war in Ukraine. The Russian president also warned that Western-imposed sanctions against Moscow over the Ukrainian crisis will eventually backfire. Regarding the upcoming presidential elections in Ukraine, Putin said Russia will respect the choice of the people, but instead that Viktor Yanukovych is still the legitimate president of the country.
Where did the unrest in Ukraine originate? It originated because President Viktor Yanukovych postponed the signing of the association agreement with the European Union. What followed? A state coup supported by our American and European partners. What more? Chaos. And now we see a full-scale civil war.
Meanwhile, at least 5 people were killed during clashes between Kiev forces and pro-Russian activists near Donetsk and eastern Ukraine, amid political and security instability in the country.
It was a red dawn, which inevitably meant that blood was being spilled. Clashes have raged in eastern Ukraine, where Kiev forces have launched a military campaign against pro-Russian separatists. At least 5 people were killed during the heavy fighting between pro-Russian activists and Ukrainian troops near the eastern city of Donetsk. Witnesses reported having seen 5 bodies, most of which belonged to separatists. When residents in the town of Slavyansk awoke, they discovered bullet holes and destroyed homes, proof that the sound of gunfire was quite real.
How it is possible not to be afraid. It is scary. During World War II, it was not the same.
They have abducted my husband directly from the house. 4 armed men came in camouflage uniforms.
On Thursday, 18 soldiers were killed in separate attacks in Donetsk and the region of Luhansk, which announced their secession from Kiev following a referendum earlier this month, marking the heaviest loss for the military since the operation was launched in mid-April. On the political arena, the Russian Chief of General Staff Valery Gerasimov has warned NATO that its buildup near the border amid the Ukrainian crisis will be met with retaliatory measures. Some Western countries have ramped up anti-Russian rhetoric and are building up NATO troops in the Baltic, Poland and Romania, as well as military presence of the alliance in the Baltic Sea, the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. We cannot be indifferent to this and will have to take measures in response. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, for his part, blamed the ongoing conflict in Ukraine on Western powers. Our Western partners rejected a truly historic chance to build a greater Europe in favor of border lines and the habitual logic of expanding the geopolitical space under their control to the east. As the government in Kiev prepares to hold presidential elections on May 25th, the situation in the east remains on edge and threatens a wider conflict, with pro-Russian separatists refusing to be forced into voting in an election they say does not represent them.
Well, as those clashes intensified in the east of the country, Ukraine's acting president said that the future independence and stability of Ukraine depend on Sunday's presidential elections.
On Sunday, May 25th, we will have the Ukrainian presidential election. For the last 3 months, our enemies have done everything they could to destabilize the situation and disrupt the elections. But Ukrainians are stronger and wiser. Today we are building a new European country, the foundation of which was laid by millions of Ukrainians who have proven that they were able to protect and defend their choice, their country.
And joining us to discuss this further is political analyst Sukan Chandan, joining us now via Skype from London. Mr. Chandan, good to have you with us today. So in 2 days, Ukraine will hold presidential elections in the country, and the situation in the east has yet to be resolved. So will these elections prove to be a solution?
No, the elections will prove to continue the crisis as we've been seeing for the last period. I mean, the election results aren't going to resolve anything. It's just going to perpetuate the situation of confrontation between the provocative actions of the West, particularly the United States. And Putin is absolutely correct that having basically enforced a coup against Kiev, now what we're seeing is total disaster and destabilization. And this is exactly what we're going to see throughout the global South. When Russia and China just concluded their 10-year-long negotiation and concluded the historic 400 billion gas deal, literally at the same time when China was advocating to Iran and Russia that they should unite an independent Asian security strategy that keeps out the United States and West Europe, hey presto, we have so-called terrorist acts going on in the west of China, which in terms of who benefits from that, only the West benefits from that. And so basically this form of Western-backed manipulated direct terrorism is what we're going to see increasingly, and the type of so-called color revolutions, which are a cloak for regime change directed by the West, as we've seen in Ukraine and also in Libya and Syria and other parts, other countries impacted by the Arab sting, are some of the forefront tactics and strategies of Western hegemony that we're going to see. So no, the elections are not going to resolve anything, but it's going to continue this very tentative chess game situation between Russia and the global South allied behind it vis-a-vis the West led by the United States.
Yes, indeed. And can you really take these results into consideration when you have pro-Russian separatists in the East saying that they will boycott the elections?
It's a complex situation. I think Putin is playing the diplomatic battle here in saying he would respect any decision that comes out of the elections. Now, really, both sides know that this is a crunch time strategically, historically. The West know it has to shut down Russia's capacity economically and militarily before Russia really modernizes and is able to match the West conventionally. And Russia knows as well that this is the West game. So really, both sides are in a very tentative struggle at the moment over Ukraine, but both sides literally cannot afford to lose. If Russia loses, then the global South is really downgraded in its capacity, which means danger for all sections of the global South throughout all the three southern continents. If the West lose, well, basically it's a major strategic victory for the global South led by Russia and China, and really Russia and China will be emboldened in that. So the stakes are extremely high.
And why does the West believe that the interim leaders in Kiev should get this popular support? I mean, does the Kiev government, is the Kiev government even legitimate?
No, the Kiev government is absolutely illegitimate. The only legitimacy it has is by dint of Western military monopoly, which can enforce these types of situations in countries. Now, Prince Charles recently quipped in Canada that Putin is acting like Hitler. But this is the same ruling class which invaded more countries than any other state ever known to humanity, and who actually appeased Hitler, hoping that Hitlerite Germany would turn against the Soviet Union. And the Soviet leadership called that bluff and turned things around. So really, the West has no right to dictate to Ukraine or to any other country in the world about its internal political setup.
And we're seeing tensions along the Ukrainian border escalate between NATO and Russia. Could we see a military confrontation between the two?
Well, it seems that the Syrian conflict, or the horrific conflict before in the Balkans, in what remained of the Yugoslav state in the 90s, is visiting East Europe again in Ukraine. So that's definitely a possibility. There was just an article today in The Economist that was analyzing Russia's military capacity. So it's very clear the West are very nervous about that. And I go back to Stratfor, which is a leading think tank in the United States close to the CIA, reproduced an article recently that it published in 2009, stating that in 15 years or so, Russia's military capacity will match the West conventionally, so it has to be put out of action before that historical phase has come to a conclusion. This is really the background to what's going on. Now, the West are very clear that they have 15 to 20 years to shut down Russia and China if they are able to exist for any much time longer than that. If they're not, Russia and China and other sections of the global South would have developed, which they should have developed by now anyway, but better late than never. And actually, actually the situation with Russia has proved that Russia has facilitated Russia developing its alliances and its capacity and its multilateral agreements with the rest of the global South, something that should have happened a lot earlier.
So who would benefit the most from a confrontation like this?
That's an interesting and complex situation. I mean, all parties don't benefit in a certain way, and all parties benefit in a certain way. The way that the West is benefiting, that it's really got to maintain its hegemony and monopoly of power across the world. So bringing Russia to heel, it's fundamental to that. And Russia and the entire global South would win if its position sees a strategic victory over Ukraine, because we would now go back to the momentum we had before the Arab Sting, which was literally month after month for around a decade, victory upon strategic victory against the West, which was most graphically illustrated by a few things, but particularly the victory of basically the Russian Axis in Georgia in 2008, essentially against NATO, and also the victory of the Lebanese Hezbollah resistance movement against the Zionist state of Israel in the July war in 2006.
Okay, Sukan Shandan there, political analyst, thank you very much for joining us today. Now stay with us here on Al Ittijah World News, still to come. The UN blacklists Nigeria's Boko Haram as a terrorist organization, but does the West have ulterior motives for getting involved in Nigeria? We'll tell you more after the break. Hello again to Al Ittijah World News. Our top stories are: Iraq takes legal actions against Turkey for exporting oil from Iraq's Kurdistan region without Baghdad's consent. Syrian militants shelled President Assad's election rally in southern Syria, killing at least 21 people. Thailand's military detains the country's former prime minister along with dozens of other politicians. And Russian President Vladimir Putin blames Washington for creating a full-scale civil war in Ukraine. Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Jawad Zarif says the Islamic Republic has a national interest in nuclear non-proliferation, and it has no plan to develop nuclear weapons. Zarif said Iran has a national security interest in non-proliferation, so if the United States is interested in non-proliferation, that is one issue. We don't want nuclear weapons, and they say the objective is to ensure Iran does not have nuclear weapons. Nuclear talks are not about nuclear capability, they are about Iranian integrity and dignity. Well, the latest report by the UN's nuclear watchdog reveals that Iran has reduced its most sensitive nuclear stockpile by more than 80%. The report further highlights that Tehran is living up to its end of the interim nuclear agreement reached in Geneva last November between the P5+1 group and Iran.
The ball is now in the court of the West. According to findings by the UN nuclear watchdog, Iran has sharply reduced its most sensitive nuclear stockpile by more than 80%. The findings of the International Atomic Energy Agency are likely to be welcomed by the six powers that are trying to negotiate a long-term deal with Iran on ending a decade-long dispute over its nuclear energy program. The Islamic Republic has always denied unsubstantiated Western allegations that it has been trying to develop the capability to build a nuclear weapon. The monthly update by the IAEA, which has a pivotal role in verifying that Iran is living up to its part of the 6-month accord reached in November, made clear that Iran is undertaking the agreed steps to curb its nuclear program. Under the half-year agreement that took effect on January 20th, Iran halted some aspects of its nuclear program in exchange for a limited easing of international sanctions. Now both sides in the ongoing negotiations are likely to intensify efforts towards a permanent deal.
Meanwhile, the Iranian army's ground forces have started the first phase of major military drills in the central province of Isfahan. The military exercises, codenamed Bayt al-Muqaddas 26, started on Friday with the test firing of indigenous Naziat and Fajr 5 missiles. Let's go back to Iraq now, where the ruling State of Law coalition, which won the largest number of seats in last month's general elections, has officially named incumbent Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki as its only candidate for premiership. The State of Law bloc said, however, it is ready to negotiate with all political parties in Iraq over its choice of Prime Minister. The bloc won 92 seats, falling short of an overall majority. Maliki's chances at becoming Prime Minister for a third term are high, but he now has to secure a broader majority coalition inside Parliament. Meanwhile, at least 9 people have been killed and 22 others injured as violence struck the Iraqi capital, Baghdad, killing 5 people, while attacks in the province of Nineveh claimed 4 lives. The explosions targeted pilgrims in the Al-Qadhimiyya neighborhood of Baghdad, where Shia Muslims have begun commemorating the martyrdom of Imam Musa al-Qadhim, a revered descendant of Prophet Muhammad. Hundreds of thousands of pilgrims from all over the world annually visit the holy shrine of the Imam, despite threats of violence. Worshippers have been walking for days from across the country to reach Al-Qadhimiyya, where rituals will take place on Saturday and Sunday. Authorities have tightened security in Baghdad to ensure the safety of pilgrims during the commemoration. Well, let's get our correspondent in Iraq, Wissam Al-Bayati, with us now over the line for the latest. Wissam, if you could tell us more about this religious event and why many Muslims from all over the world participate despite the threat of violence.
Yes, in fact, the Iraqi government has finalized its preparations to host the martyrdom of Imam Hussein's commemoration. As more than, according to the Holy Shrine Management, more than 3 million people have actually took part in the ceremony, and the pilgrimage is supposed to take place within the next 24 hours. In fact, the Iraqi security forces have heavily deployed in and around the holy city of Qadhimiyya, where the holy shrine is located, and more than 3,000 Iraqi security personnel are taking part in securing the routes leading to the holy city of Qadhimiyya in the capital Baghdad. The Iraqi cabinet has specified more than 6 Iraqi ministries to take part in providing the best security and services to the pilgrims, in addition to the pilgrims have actually showed satisfaction towards the preparations that have been put in place by the Iraqi government. So far, 2 attacks took place against the pilgrims nearby the holy city of Qadmiyah. But at the same time, the Iraqi security forces have assured that the casualties have actually, the injuries have exceeded 12 people, and more than 3 people have been killed during the attacks. But at the same time, they have actually stressed that the terrorists have actually pulled themselves up after attempting to enter the city of Qadmiyah, and they have failed. Yes.
Well, what are Iraqis telling you, or pilgrims visiting the shrine telling you? I mean, are these latest attacks raising doubts among these visitors? Are they raising any doubts about visiting this holy shrine?
To be honest with you, I have talked to too many pilgrims, and they have assured that such attacks will never deprive them of taking part of the most sacred ceremonies, especially the commemoration of the martyrdom of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far al-Kadhim. In addition to, they say that such attacks will encourage the people to go to take part in such spiritual events. In addition to, they say that they have faith in the security forces, and the performance of the Iraqi security forces is more than acceptable. As they say, that the Iraqi security forces is dealing with the situation in a very professional way. And they decide that most of the Iraqi security forces, as I mentioned, are really cooperating with the pilgrims, and even the security leaders have urged the Iraqi pilgrims, even the foreign pilgrims, to cooperate and show full cooperation with the Iraqi security forces. They say that they have manned these checkpoints, and the security measures have been put in place to secure the pilgrims from any other further attacks against the pilgrims during the pilgrimage. Yes.
Okay, Wissam, thank you for that. Wissam Al-Bayati there, our correspondent in Iraq. Security sources in Libya said 20 members of a single family were wounded when a rocket slammed into their home near an army base in the city of Benghazi overnight. The family's home lies close to the headquarters of the Army's Special Forces unit in the city, which is backing the Rogue General Khalifa Haftar, who has vowed to crush Islamist-linked groups. Security forces in Egypt's volatile Sinai Peninsula have killed Shadi al-Mani, the leader of the militant group Ansar Bayt al-Maqdis. According to Egyptian authorities, al-Mani was killed when security forces opened fire on 4 men traveling in a car in central Sinai. However, conflicting reports have emerged suggesting that unidentified assailants fatally shot Mani and 5 other members of the group. Well, almost a year after ousting Egypt's Islamist president Mohamed Morsi, the army is poised to strengthen its grip on political life with a near certain electoral victory of retired army chief Abdel Fattah al-Sisi.
With the presidential elections just 3 days away, Egypt's former Field Marshal Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is expected to easily defeat his only rival, leftist politician Hamdin Sabahi, almost 1 year after the army overthrew Mohamed Morsi. Sisi would become the 5th army official to become president since the army toppled the monarchy back in 1952. The only exception over the past 6 decades has been Morsi, who was elected in 2012, a year after an uprising overthrew the former Western-backed dictator Hosni Mubarak. The 2011 uprising initially caught the army off guard, along with other state institutions. Eventually, though, it was the army who removed Mubarak, a former Air Force general, after deciding he could no longer govern in the face of almost 3 weeks of massive protests. During Morsi's rule, he sought to steadily curb the power of the army generals. He sacked the former defense minister, a Mubarak appointee who ruled in the interim following the strongman's ouster, and replaced him with Sisi. But Sisi, a military intelligence chief toppled Morsi after millions protested to demand the Islamists' resignation. The army has since taken on an even more central role than that allowed by Mubarak, who heavily relied on an inner circle of palace insiders and his vast security police apparatus. Analysts say that the military, taken aback by the popular uprising, made an alliance of sorts with Morsi's Muslim Brotherhood, then the largest political force in the country, that won all elections it contested since 2011. But it found an opportunity to pull the rug out from under Morsi, with a large opposition movement against the divisive Islamists. Sisi, little known under his appointment as defense minister, has since become a hero to the millions who protested against Morsi and demanded he run for president. However, only time will tell if the former army chief, turned presidential frontrunner, will be able to implement change and improve the ailing economy in the most populous Middle Eastern nation.
Fresh clashes have erupted in the tiny Persian Gulf island of Bahrain between Saudi-backed security forces and anti-government protesters in several towns, as the ruling Al Khalifa regime continues its heavy-handed crackdown on political dissent.
Adding to the brutal home raids and countless arrests, along with other measures that far from meet international legal standards, the unfolding of events in Bahrain reveals that the security crackdown has crossed all lines and gone far beyond rationality in Saudi-backed security crackdown on political dissent. Here, the faces of citizens are faded behind the thick clouds of tear gas fired at them by Bahraini regime forces to disperse demonstrators holding an anti-regime rally in the Ras Rumman neighborhood in the capital, Manama. Similar clashes broke out in Bahrain's northeastern island of Sitra and the western village of Shahrakan, where demonstrators protested against the killing of 14-year-old Sayyid Mahmoud Sayyid Mohsen. Mohsen was killed by Bahraini riot police during violent skirmishes that broke out in Sitra earlier this week. However, Mohsen is just one of hundreds of citizens who have died in numerous peaceful pro-democracy protests, which usually transform into clashes with riot police in the streets of Bahrain. Meanwhile, during the weekly Friday sermon, the leading Shiite cleric denounced the government's policies in dealing with the majority of the population's concerns.
What the government describes as reforms is in fact a parody. This is not what people of Bahrain have fought for. It doesn't reflect the demands for which Bahrainis paid a heavy price and for which they are suffering in detention.
More than 100 activists have been killed and thousands of others injured or detained since the beginning of the uprising in 2011. However, the Al Khalifa regime have failed to suppress the voices demanding democratic and political reforms in the kingdom.
Four-insurgent gunmen launched a pre-dawn attack on India's consulate in the western Afghan city of Herat before being repelled by security forces. There were no casualties reported among the staff at the mission, but at least 2 policemen were wounded when the heavily armed attackers stormed a house close to the consulate and opened fire on the building. The United Nations has imposed sanctions on Nigeria's militant group Boko Haram, blacklisting it as a terrorist organization. The terror designation, immediately welcomed by the United States, subjects Boko Haram to an arms embargo and asset freeze, though it remains unclear what practical impact it will have. Well, the search and rescue mission for the kidnapped Nigerian schoolgirls appears to be fully underway. But questions have arisen over the timing of this multinational U.S.-led military operation.
Being the most populous African nation, Nigeria also boasts the continent's largest oil reserves and has emerged as this year's largest economy in Africa. But the wealth has also attracted an unwelcome entity over the years. Boko Haram, an Islamic extremist group, has been wreaking havoc across the country. The group is known for bombing churches, mosques, schools, and police stations. The Boko Haram insurgency has resulted in an estimated 10,000 deaths between 2002 and 2013. But all this has received little to no media attention until recently, after Boko Haram abducted more than 200 girls last month from a school in northern Nigeria. The world was up in arms to bring these girls home 4 weeks after they were taken by the militants. The U.S. led the charge, with the First Lady, Michelle Obama, taking personal interest in the kidnapped girls, while Washington sent 80 members of its armed forces to Chad to help in the search for the abducted teenagers. The White House has also indicated that Predator drones will be used in the search and rescue mission. Adding to that, the listing of Boko Haram as a terrorist group by the UN. There's a big chance that Nigeria may descend into war, as Islamists have responded to the global attention by stepping up attacks, killing hundreds in recent weeks. But the surge in violence coincided with another important date for the Nigerian state. The sudden Western interest in Nigeria came only days after Beijing and Abuja signed a historic multi-billion-dollar deal to construct a railroad that would link the country together. For years, Beijing has been building a market in Africa. In fact, China has now surpassed the U.S. as the continent's biggest trading partner, with lucrative mining, energy, and infrastructure investments on the continent. Boko Haram's kidnappings have presented Washington with a golden opportunity to secure a foothold in the oil-rich country. But U.S. foreign policy that compensates economic shortcomings with military superiority is an old tale, and it looks like the latest cover of their latest edition is the face of these girls.
China has blamed Thursday's attack, which killed 31 people in the autonomous region of Xinjiang, on terrorist organizations from other states. This as Beijing announced that it was putting its security forces on the highest state of alert.
Normally, this marketplace would be bustling with people buying and selling fruit and vegetables displayed in wooden carts along Uramki's narrow pavements. But that is no longer the case in the capital of China's Xinjiang region, a day after 5 suspects blew themselves up in an open market, leaving 31 people dead. Police are on high alert, and the area has been fortified as China's authorities have vowed to crush the swollen arrogance of terrorists.
After the incident happened, President Xi Jinping asked local authorities to solve the case quickly, punish the terrorists severely, put the injured under proper care, offer condolences to families of the victims, and strengthen social control and security in key areas. President Xi also urges high-pressure policy upon terrorists and all-out efforts in maintaining social stability.
Investigations are underway as to whether more accomplices were at large. Beijing has blamed the works of this attack on terrorist organizations from other states. But China's violence-ridden Xinjiang has recently been the scene of several attacks. This latest attack comes less than a month after an explosion hit a train station in Urumqi, killing 3 and wounding 79 others. Chinese authorities have also linked the mass knife attack back in March, which killed 29 people at a train station in the southwestern city of Kunming, to separatists from Xinjiang. A growing radicalization of China's autonomous region of Xinjiang, home to the country's mainly Muslim Uyghur minority, has been apparent most recently. Critics of Beijing believe it is driven by decades of discrimination and economic inequality. However, China's assertion of foreign elements being behind this latest attack begs the question: is Beijing's recent foreign policy over territory in the South China Sea, or its latest billion-dollar gas deal with Moscow, a reason to attack the world's second largest economy?
Dubbed the Tree of Life, the moringa is the latest plant species to enter the field of alternative medicine. Its possible benefits have made it the subject of study in Sudan. Our Sudanese correspondent Ahmed Saeed Ahmed filed the following report.
Mint, cardamom, and other herbs are all predecessors to a newcomer in the field of alternative medicine, moringa. Moringa has enthralled people all over the world with its medicinal and other surprising uses, which include biofuel.
The products of this tree are rich in minerals such as iron, phosphorus, calcium, and are also rich in vitamins such as vitamin A and vitamin C. It also strengthens the immunity system. It includes antioxidants and provides fodder to animals, which in turn provide milk and meat.
The most common genus of the plant, Moringa oleifera, is indigenous to the Himalayas, and Moringa stenoplata, native to Africa, are both used to treat ailments comprising vitamin deficiency and hair loss, among others.
The so-called life tree is used to treat diabetes, blood pressure, and obesity. It is also used to treat over 300 diseases, but attention must be paid to how it is used to accomplish these goals.
People use moringa in a variety of fashions, ranging from direct consumption of leaves and pods to applying moringa oil to one's body, as well as drinking moringa tea to regulate blood pressure and diabetes. This is the moringa tea, which includes a number of nutrient substances. It is prepared in the same manner as regular tea, but it mustn't be boiled. This is infant food, which serves as an alternative to Cerelac. The Sudanese president dubbed moringa the family tree, while the tree's benefits left such a strong impression that the country's Ministry of Science and Technology established the Moringa Research Council to explore the tree's prospects and held a conference at the ministerial level.
We are here today at the first Moringa conference to publish the research conducted by you, the researchers. Research which enriches our knowledge about the tree and to enlighten regular citizens, traders and consumers about the benefits of this great tree.
Moringa is being taken note of all over the world for its medicinal and commercial prospects, which are said to yield $25 billion annually. The government of Sudan ordered the allocation of 100,000 acres in each of the 18 states of the country for cultivating the so-called tree of life, in a step marking the significance of the plant. Ahmed Saeed Ahmed, Al-Ittijah News Channel, Khartoum.
Now, a reminder of our top stories. Iraq takes legal actions against Turkey for exporting oil from Iraq's Kurdistan region without Baghdad's consent. Syrian militants shelled President Assad's election rally in southern Syria, killing at least 21 people. Thailand's military detains the country's former prime minister along with dozens of other politicians. And Russian President Vladimir Putin blames Washington for creating a full-scale civil war in Ukraine. That's it for today. Have a good night.